All right. Are we working now? Having some technical difficulties today, guys. That's all right. Is anyone able to hear me right now? Can you guys hear me? All right, all right. Here we go. Okay. It's one of those days. It's all right. Let's get started. Pull up the Instagram. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody. It has been a month. It has been a busy month. It's been a lot going on, but I'm glad to be here right now. Haven't it's been a little while since I've gone live. We got some cool stuff I'm going to get into today. I'm going to be talking about sexual alchemy and transmuting sexual energy. Lots of good stuff. A little update. Um, just bought a house, moved, and this is my home now. Got a forest in my backyard. I'm building a trail out there, a little practice sanctuary space. Uh, it was a process, let me tell you. Talk about a process of manifestation and a real test of my trust in the universe and the path I'm on. But here I am, excited about that. Maybe I'll talk more about that sometime. But today I want to dive right in and talk about sexual alchemy. Sexual alchemy, alchemizing sexual energy. And this is both a branch of, we could say, there's external sexual alchemy and there's internal sexual alchemy. Of course, external sexual alchemy is going to involve a partner, an external exchange of sexual energy. And internal sexual alchemy is a little more subtle. It's working with your own energy, working with the various energies of your own body to create a coupling, to create a mix of polarities. So so basically external sexual alchemy is going to be relationships and sex, and internal alchemy is going to be meditative practices, internal alchemical meditations. So let's talk about, because alchemy is basically we're fusing forces to create a third force. It's the more Western alchemical systems involve transforming base metals into refined substances like gold, or the creation of the philosopher's stone. And a lot of the Eastern alchemy practices are about taking two forces together to create a third force. And we could basically talk about water and fire, these elements of water and fire. And when mixed together, when you mix water and fire, you get steam. So water and fire represent polarities. They represent the union of masculine and feminine energies, yin and yang. So when you mix these energies together, once again, you get a third force, you get a neutral force. And this is what's driving sexual attraction in a lot of ways. Is It's the attraction of opposites. It's the polarity and the magnetism that is built between polarities, and the desire to resolve the tension that arises when two polarities are in contact with each other. And we can use this knowledge to amplify a lot of processes, of course, the process of pleasure, connection, love, and intimacy. But beyond that, to amplify our own personal growth, our our completion of we could say imbalances we have in our mind, our body, and our spirit, and our spiritual evolution as well. So this is kind of what we can get into. Some of the applications of sexual alchemy is really it's alchemy is really a process of accelerated evolution, accelerated growth. And so talking about unifying masculine and feminine energies. So when we're talking about external sexual alchemy here, this is the sexual relationship. And what does it require to have a most intimate, passionate, sexual connection because the more passion, the more attraction, the more intense the exchange is going to be, the more potent your practice is going to be. But this is where a lot of people run into trouble because in a lot of ways the modern world is losing polarity in the sexual dynamics of people. We're human beings are becoming much more androgynous in a certain sense, and it's not like not to get into like political things here, but it's just for various reasons. People are really struggling in relationships, and there is often a lack of polarity in relationships, and that's almost always what's drying relationships up and what's causing people to run into dead ends in their relationships, to have their sex life dry up, or to have trouble attracting a partner. It's because you don't know how to create polarity. So understanding this, because this has been huge work for me the past few years, is really stepping into my masculinity. It's like if you want, as a man, if you're dating a woman and you want her to be in her feminine, receptive nature, which she must be to get into her deepest states of pleasure and orgasm, you must be in a masculine state of leadership, of expansion, of guiding the process. And so the more you can step into your masculine, it's like you're feeding your own fire. Male sexual energy is fire, female sexual energy is water. Of course, we all have aspects of yin and yang within us, but overall, if you want to create polarity, you must maximize this elemental tension, water and fire. So the more that you can be in that positive pole, the more your partner will be in that negative pole. And the more that you can develop skill of getting into this. And here's the thing, like this has been a big challenge for me the past month. It's been a stressful month for me. Just the changes I've been going through in my life, moving somewhere else, not knowing again, the closing process on buying this house was ridiculous. Like again, it was like all these things just came into place at the last moment, but it was like I don't know if I'm going to have somewhere to live next week. So it was a stressful process for me. And then of course just moving has its stresses on its own. So I found myself going back into a lot of unconscious patterns, a lot of my nice guy patterns. And because this is what happens. I've been talking a lot about the nice guy syndrome and like how important it is as a man, if you want to have a partner who's receptive to you, you must be in your masculine polarity. And it's constant work, it's constant diligence, it's constant awareness, because when we lose awareness of how we are engaging ourselves, how we are interacting with others, and the way that the dynamic that we're interacting in. Because what we tend to do is function on autopilot. We tend to function on the subconscious patterns that we picked up in our childhood and our early development. And so when we lose complete conscious awareness of how we're holding ourselves, we go back to those old patterns. So basically, um, one of the greatest arts of because when it comes to sexual kung fu and sexual practice, it's one thing to be able to control your ejaculation. It's one thing to be able to have non-ejaculatory orgasms, to be able to circulate sexual energy through your body, and this is important. But another very important skill set is being able to hold presence in a way and interact with your partner in a way that you can skillfully build desire and attraction in them. So you can as a man, bring the water to a boil and so she hungers for your fire, you know what I mean? So that's part of the sexual alchemy is learning how to hold yourself in a polarity in a relationship and be able to shift back into that, because inevitably as we go about daily life, I mean, my wife and I, we both are we live very productive, busy lives, and we're both, running businesses. We're both in this like expansive nature a lot of the time, and so one of the challenges for me was like, how do I navigate? How do I help to bring us out of this state where we're like kind of business partners and step into being lovers? And I didn't understand for a while how to change that dynamic, and um, it was a challenge for me. But once I really understood, like what I'm sharing here, this aspect of being able to step into polarity, being able to step into a state of creating desire in your partner, then I started to understand, okay, we can have these different kind of phases of our day. Like, okay, now we're not in a state of polarity right now. We don't have to be intensively romantically attracted to each other 24/7. Like right now, we're having a more logical discussion about like what business plans do we have, etc. But then to be able to create a boundary of like, okay, that take the business hat off, step into a different room, and like now let's be lovers, and how to transition into that. And that's a whole practice on its own, and I'm teaching a lot of this in the Sex God course, so, like, the direct partner practice of, like, how to sit with your partner and simply do these internal engagements that build polarity and build attraction, resonance with your partner. So that's a part of the alchemy, that's a part of it, is being able to feed your fire, have your partner feed their water so that you can have that strong attraction. Because, once again, one of the things that you create, talking about alchemy being the merging of 2 elements to create a third force. 2 forces, 2 polarities merge to create a third force. And the third force here is the neutral force. We take positive and negative, yin and yang. And what happens when you couple these? Creates that steam. It creates a neutral force. And this is one of the reasons I think that humans crave sex so much. Because when we have sex with someone, in a certain sense, we get out of this feeling of excessive polarity, feeling like I'm in this body, it's polarized, and there's an inherent tension to that. And when I'm having sex with my partner, uh, I feel a sense of merging. Like a lot of people in tantra talk about finding God through sex, feeling at one it- through the feeling at one with the universe in this incredible cosmic orgasm experience. Because you do transcend polarity. Fire and water mix. It opens up this portal within your body for the central channel to open, the third force to open. And so with skill, with awareness, you can intensify this process and use it consciously to really improve your health, your creativity, your sense of purpose, whatever, like anything you're doing in your life, you dramatically improve by this process. It's incredibly healing. And this is quite a contrast to how most people approach sex because most people are engaging in sex at a completely animalistic level, essentially just trying to scratch an itch, just feed like a hunger. And not that, you know, not that that's wrong per se. It's just that only having this completely unconscious, very impulsive driven relationship to your sexuality is ultimately fulfilling and even depleting because, of course, one of the greatest expenditures of life force for man is excessive ejaculation. So this process of sexual alchemy involves harnessing the sexual energy within the body. I'm gonna get to questions here at the end of this little at the end of the lesson, I'll get to questions, so feel free to type your questions anytime. I will get to them shortly. So, it's a transformation of this raw, sometimes heavy, sometimes just uncomfortable primal desire that our sexuality is. Well, there's a lot of factors to this. First of all, inherently, yes, our sex drive and that sexual desire is this it's a raw, driving, intense, very expansive energy. But what a lot of men struggle with is that we've been programmed to be uncomfortable with sexual arousal. We've programmed ourselves to have a need to release it as soon as we feel it. Like I feel sexual urgency. I need to ejaculate. I need to scratch that itch immediately. And this parallels in a lot of areas in our life. Like we feel desire and we want to have it remedied immediately. Like, well, I want this thing. I should have it now. People become uncomfortable with desire, and that's a part of it. That's a part of all this process. Is desire is a force. It's a powerful force to work with. Because if you have no desire, you're just sitting on the couch eating potato chips, playing video games, watching porn. That's a very, very dull life. It always leaves you wanting more, and you just spend more and more. You never get very far with that. So, when you allow desire to be that fire that burns and fuels your life, it fuels you, it fuels your relationships because you know how to sustain that desire, build it, and create it in an artistic way. And you tr this is what sexual transmutation is all about. It's about taking that desire, that raw sexual desire, and turning it into a different form of desire. Being comfortable with desire and letting that drive you to be more whatever you wanna be. More balanced, more productive, more creative, more spiritual, a more decent person, more self-confident, whatever it is. That's what the drive transmits into. And so and this is a practice. So this is really about integrating your sexuality into your spiritual path and making sex a spiritual practice in a certain sense. This is what really attracted me to these practices in the first place was because I was getting on this spiritual path, and I was really just, like, going down the deep rabbit holes, questioning everything about reality and who am I? What is this universe? What is the meaning of everything? And once I felt like I was finding some answers, it was like, "Well, how does sex fit into this?" Because I have this enormous sexual desire, I have this enormous sex drive, and I feel that there's something inherently spiritual about sex, but I don't know how to integrate it. And so this path of sexual alchemy, this path of sexual kung fu, of tantra, really kinda filled that gap for me into where I felt like my sexuality started to fit in with my spiritual path because here's the thing about relationships, talking about the external sexual alchemy with a partner, the conflicts that arise in your relationships, the issues that arise in your relationships are always they're always mirroring something within you, a subconscious pattern that you have, a belief about yourself, um, how you interact and hold yourself in a state of independence and leadership or a lack thereof. It's always going to be mirrored in your relationship. So when things are going wrong with your relationship, it's easy to blame your partner. And like, sure, you could legitimately have a partner who's a complete asshole or whatever. There's definitely that. But you have, but it's also like, well, why did you? Why were you attracted to a complete asshole? Why were you attracted to a narcissist? Whatever it is, a control freak. So deep down inside of you, often what it is, it's a dynamic that you had in your childhood with your parents or, some other dynamic, and you feel like that's what you deserve on some level, you know what I mean? So this is where the shadow work comes in, and this is another part of the alchemy is whenever you're running into issues in relationships, you can really it's this is the most challenging thing. It's easy to sit here and talk about it, but as we all well know, when you're in the trigger of it in a relationship, it's brutal. It's intense. Like, relationships are the most intense experiences we can have, no doubt. But if you can have that clarity and that discipline to be able to really see, okay, what is this conflict in my relationship reflecting about myself? What aspect of myself do I need to improve? What do I need to step into? What do I need to harmonize, balance, or like be more conscious of? And you can really grow from that. But so if you have two people doing this together, it's incredibly powerful. But it's not always so easy, is it? Not everyone's open to taking that deep, realistic inner look. So again, this isn't an easy path. This is a path of mastery. It's a path of spiritual growth and discipline. And there's a lot of energetic work. This is what sexual kung fu one of the the heart of the sexual kung fu system is preparing your mind and body for this process. Because again, an important part here for a man is that you're not ejaculating frequently because you wanna be able to harness that sexual energy. You wanna be able to harness that essence of your sperm that's ignited during sexual arousal, mix it with your partner's energy, and hold that within your body, because if you just ejaculate every time, you lose it. So we wanna build that energy over time. We wanna cultivate it. We want to store it in your body as fuel. And here's the most practical, obvious example of what this looks like is you imagine having sex, you're having amazing sex, and maybe for you it's normal at the end, like, "Okay, now I ejaculate, it's over. I feel I feel satisfied," but it's just like, "Yeah, okay. I'm 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 fine just kinda sitting around and feeling a little calm and fatigued now." Well, the contrast to this is you're having amazing passionate sex, and then instead of just discharging that, you you move the energy from being strongly ignited in your genitals to other spaces in the body. There's a lot of areas you can bring the energy into. The good starting point is the lower dantian energy, essentially the energetic battery in the lower belly. And now you store that raw, intense sexual desire and pleasure. It's stored there, and you're now vibrating with that energy. It becomes a fuel that you use the rest of the day, and the rest of the day, you're like, "Wow, I have all this energy. I wanna do something creative. I want to express this this bliss that I'm feeling, this incredible pleasure that I'm living in. I want to express it." And it's going to change you quite profoundly as a person. So, you gotta do the second kung fu work. You gotta do the breath work, the qigong, opening up the channels. This is kind of the mechanical daily grind of having the practice that prepares your body to do this, to prepare your nervous system so that you can have ejaculation control, so that you can have non-ejaculatory orgasms, and you can be, safely harness this high level of energy so you're you're vibing hard out there, and people walking around, they're like, "Who's this guy?" Like, he's like, he's buzzing, and I feel it. Alright. And that's the external sexual alchemy. And I just wanna take a moment here. I'll get to questions here in a second. But I wanna talk a little bit about internal sexual alchemy because this is a little more subtle. It's not so well known or widely practiced. Not that the other thing is widely practiced. So this is really the heart of, like, Neidan, which is Taoist internal alchemy. There's a lot of mirrors of this in tantra, different paths of tantra, where essentially, instead of acting out this process externally, this process of sexual desire, sexual connection, and intimacy, it's an internal process. And the specific process that I learned is called Kan and Li, internal alchemy, which is Kan is water, Li is fire. So this water fire energy, essentially, you're gathering your internal male female energies, your own yin and yang essences, and gathering them in various locations in the body, gathering the essences of the organs, the glands, coupling that internally within the lower dantian. Well, there's different areas you can couple as your practice develops, but you fuse these energies together, and this creates a powerful transmutation of your sexual energy. It creates a powerful, almost resolution to this internal polarity, and it tends to transform a lot of dynamics you have around, your sexual relationships, your connection with your mother and father, and the issues you're playing out from that. When I first learned this practice in 2017, it dramatically transformed my relationships. So, basically, um, I'm just gonna throw it out there because some of you might be interested in this, and it's a little more subtle. I do teach, kind of the beginning stage of this internal economy practice in my multi-orgasmic man course, but and if you guys are, like, curious about learning this, like, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll share more about this internal sexual alchemy. This is Nadon, and this is the path in of refining your own basically, the essences of your body, your mind, your spirit, and refining that into a concentrated substance or energy that generates a very spiritual energy within you. It's hard to put in words, but the experience of it is quite profound. Okay, so that's the path of sexual alchemy overall. I mean, it's a tip of the iceberg. Um, and with that, I'm gonna get into questions. And you guys who are, like, new to this stuff, you're like, "What the hell is this guy talking about? This sounds interesting, but I don't even know where to begin." Got tons of resources on my YouTube channel. Check out my sexual kung fu exercises playlist for some, like, practical tools, my qigong playlist as well. And a good starting point to, like, really dive into the sexual kung fu system is my male sexual mastery course, uh, which is kind of the beginning stages. It's like the most essential foundations of sexual kung fu practice. It's on my website, and I'll give you good, kind of the first steps in your journey of this. Alright, I'm gonna answer some questions now. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box. Master Boostman says, "Do you have a favorite exercise to prevent ejaculation?" Basically just keep my mind and body relaxed. Breathe. That's really the roots of my ejaculation control now. Of course, there's a lot of other techniques which I use and I'll practice depending on the circumstances, but overall, for me now, mostly It's just breathe, relax, hold presence here with my partner, and also kind of periodically circulating the sexual energy through my body as well. Alec Buton says, dangerous to do too quickly, but how do you know the pace for development? It's a good question. I mean, I think it's always good that you're kind of studying with the system that's kind of put in place. So you have some like guide stones. I've always been working with teachers, so I would always kind of had my questions answered. Um, but overall, it's like, and really like what I really enjoy about the Taoist practice is that they're laid out in a way that you kind of a lot of the higher level stuff doesn't really work until you're prepared for it. That's how for me a lot of the more subtle Neigong, Neidong practices are, is like they don't really do anything until you're actually have the energy body infrastructure in place to make it happen. That's how the most advanced practices have been for me anyway. Tara Mia is asking, what daily practices would you suggest to get to that higher energy state? For me, it's qigong. That's the number one thing I recommend is qigong practice. It's a very simple, well, it can be complex, but overall, it's a very practical daily uh, something to integrate to really build your energy, and that's what's for me has had the greatest results is qigong practices above all other things that I practiced. Bec- Because says, been doing your qigong routine and feel amazing. Thank you. Awesome. Glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, I've got tons of qigong routines on my YouTube channel in my qigong playlist. It's a Persia. What's up? Multigasm Misha man. What's up, brother? Brother from Europe. Rendell Frank says, how do you keep your sexual energy grounded in any environment, even ones that are highly negative? Just maintaining your presence, maintaining your calm, collected state. I mean, it's just your energy in general. You know what I mean? You don't specifically focus on keep my sexual energy grounded. I'm not sure if you're talking about like during a sex, like you're having sex with someone in like a weird place or something, or just like generally, you're out in the world, you're getting some weird vibes, you're like, stay grounded, stay contained. For me, the go-to is just like relax the body, relax the belly, sink my tension down my spine and into the earth, feel the earth beneath my feet. Sometimes I do some more fancy energetic practices as well. The belt channel, the daimai is a really nice tool you can use. Just think of like a ball spinning around your waistline or like rings around your entire body spinning. It helps to engage your daimai, your belt channel, which is kind of this container of all the other running channels in your body. It creates a strong boundary between you and the external world. So that's something that's valuable as well. Nostalgia says, can you tell us some spiritual experiences you get from this practice? Happily. I probably shared these before, but I think I talked about this one in my last lives, but here we go again, just because it is asking. I'm gonna repeat it. So, one experience that comes to mind is I was having sex with my partner. We're doing external sexual alchemy, and, um, after a while, I don't know how long, 30 minutes, an hour, something, things started to it's a dramatic shift. 'Cause it's like when I start to go into the full body orgasm state, that's a shift within itself. It's like my full body just basically feels orgasmic, feels incredibly pleasurable. My whole body becomes like an erogenous sexual organ is what it feels like. But sometimes it goes deeper than that, where all of a sudden it starts to feel like I'm underwater and time and space shift. And there's a feeling of really was like, I used to do a lot of psychedelic drugs in my younger years when I was young and reckless. That's what it reminded me of because the thought forms become much more fractal, expansive, trippy, and this feeling of, like, my energy body just massively, massively expanding, like, beyond the planet. It sounds silly, maybe woo, but it's what it felt like, and at the same time, it was like this spiraling vortex was being created, like, and we were inside the center of it, and it I had a feeling that, like, there was all these beings around watching us. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to say. I know it's a weird it sounds weird me saying it right now, but legitimately, there's just, like that's what it felt like, very strong, like, yeah, there's these beings just on the outside of this, like, energetic vortex, which I think was, like, our I've heard some teachers talk about the central channels expanding and, like, the sexual practices, you create, like, a 3rd central channel together, a neo-central channel, I think Bruce Francis calls it this, and that may have been what I was experiencing, 'cause it was just this, like, pillar of, like, vertical blasting off spiritual energy, but there was, like it felt like there was things, like astral beings or something, I don't know, around the outside of it, and there was some weird stuff out there too, it felt like we were just, like, exuding so much energy that, it was like a things were showing up to watch and observe, and be like, "What's happening here?" And after we finished, this went on for a while, and I was still in just this deeply altered type of state, like, very psychedelic, very intense. Um, Afterwards, we were going to sleep, and I was still just buzzing hard and like, "Okay, I need to, like, pull our energy back together." I feel like I needed to create this strong boundary because I had, like, really opened something up, and it was very interesting. So, there's an experience that comes to mind. And that's not like every time I have sex, it's like that, you know what I mean? I don't really want it to be like that. I don't know if I can handle that every day, but it was an interesting experience, and I've had very similar experiences many, many times. Just happens, spontaneous. Okay, where am I at? Mahira is asking, "My penis is numb after taking ashwagandha. Is ashwagandha an SSRI?" I don't believe ashwagandha is an SSRI, but, if it really made your penis numb, then stop taking it. I've never heard of this happening though, but who knows? Maybe some, like, super rare, um, reaction to it. Jad Z Sab is asking, I didn't get an erection after putting delay cream on my ball sack. What should I do?" Don't put I don't recommend using delay cream, and, don't if you use it, you don't get an erection, then don't use it. You also took a delay pill. Okay, so yeah. I don't recommend these, like, external things, pharmaceutical things. William Cranston says, "I learned Connolly from Chia back in the '80s. He was such a good teacher, but back then I would like to learn the more updated way." Yeah, I studied this with Michael Wynn. I've learned some different versions from other teachers as well, um, but the core of it is similar, and what I found was that I first learned it in 2017 and had some phenomenal experiences with it. Very powerful. I was practicing it hardcore for a while after that, um, but it was when I think it was like a year or 2 later when I started really getting into, like, Dantian work, where I understood how important to, like, fully build the Dantian was for a lot of the stuff to really work at a higher level. That's when the practice just really took off for me. And it's a very any other question here, nostalgia saying, "I've read about Quantum Leap a few days ago, and it looks advanced. What's your experience?" So, my experience with it has been again, the way I learned it is many I've learned different variations of it, but for me, the essence of it is that you're learning to draw these, um the essences of different organs. Like you draw the heat from the fiery organs, from the heart, small intestine, the adrenals, even the brain. You draw that into a collection point in the heart center, and then you draw the water energies from the sexual organs, the kidneys, the fluids of the body. You draw that into the perineum, which is it's another kind of gene storage point. And then with your mind, you after concentrating these energies for a while, like you'll feel this heat in the chest. You'll feel the heat, the kind of the coolness in the perineum. That's more difficult for me to feel, but I feel the heat very strongly. And then you move them in the channel system so you invert the polarity because fires, wants to rise and burn out. Water wants to sink and drop off. That's what causes our aging and our death is our fires rising up out of our body, escaping up to the head. Our waters, our vitality is dripping out of the body, dripping out of the sexual organs, whatever. So we invert the fire energy to be under the water energy. So now the fire rises up, the water sinks down, and it's like you have a cauldron space now. The water's heating with the water, or the fire's heating the water above it. It creates this steam, and then you can guide that steam throughout the body. So that's basically the commonly practice. And again, there's various applications and ways to get the cooking going, but it's a profound practice. I will say that, and something I work with quite frequently. And then Michael Wynn's system, it progresses into the higher formulas. The greater Lee, which is sun and moon alchemy, greatest Lee, planetary alchemy, star alchemy. It goes deep. And I've had some very profound experiences with a lot of that work. And it took me years, honestly, to really um, get far with those practices because in the beginning, it often just felt like a visualization exercise. But once I understood how to really like connect with the energies, it became very profound. Rendell Frank says, "How important is it to clear negative energy in order to have full body orgasms?" So, well, here's the thing. Like, sometimes the stuff gets very like abstract and overly simplified. Like, yeah, just clear your negative energy. Then you don't have negative energy. Then you have positive energy. You're good. But in reality, like, what does it really look like? Basically, for example, like what I teach is that if you have all these very loud negative patterns, if you have all these blockages in your channel system, all you have all this anger constricting the right side of your body and your diaphragm. You have a lack of self-love really, like, blocking up the back channel between the shoulder blades. If you have all this anxiety and worries blocking up your stomach, your digestion, then, it can be difficult to get into a state of deep receptivity and pleasure and just feel good in your body. So because it's not as simple as like, okay, here's an negative energy clearing practice. You do it. Now you have no more negative energy. You're perfect. Everything's good. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. It's like, how do you it's tools to like vent excessive negative emotion, pathogenic chi, this really constricted, hot, fiery energy that's just making you feel shitty. It's being able to release that, being able to release successes of that. So you're like, okay, oh, okay. I feel a little better now. Now I can ah, now I don't feel so impatient and, like, angry and tense and just, rushed. Now I can take my time. I can feel deep into my sexual center. I can breathe the energy of my orbit. So, basically, it's like, it is important it's not like you have to be a fucking saint to this work. Here's the thing, you're always gonna have negative emotions arise. You're always gonna have anger and frustration and occasional self-doubt and things like that. It's just, like, learning to lessen these things, learning to, like, not be stuck in these chronic negative emotional patterns constantly, and to be completely reactive when things arise inevitably, especially in relationships, and to be able to get yourself out of a negative state if you are in one before you do, some sexual cultivation yourself with a partner. That's important, and that's, a huge part of what I teach and kind of the foundation of practices that I teach. Okay, Myra is saying, "I used to watch porn for 2 years. Now when I get involved, I only get an erection while sexting. Is this porn-induced erectile dysfunction? I cannot achieve a sustainable erection. Also, why is it that I took ashwagandha and now my erection is worse after taking ashwagandha?" Well, okay, I have a feeling it has more to do with this rewiring of your brain from porn, which is one of the most destructive things to the proper functioning of the male sexual system, which is why I think porn is a systemic control system of castration for men. So, quitting porn is important, and there's a process of, like, rewiring your mind and body, and maybe you had a negative reaction to ashwagandha, but maybe not, maybe it's just, like, you know, what's already in place, but either way, you could stop taking ashwagandha if you're paranoid about that. Check out my YouTube video, uh, Esoteric Sexual Vitality Optimization Guide. That will give you a lot of resources that, like I made this video basically like, here's everything that I think you need to take into factor to achieve sexual vitality, and check that out. I'm also dropping another video tomorrow on, some other sexual health stuff, which will be very beneficial. Okay, CBS Gonzalez says, "Can this energy be practiced by same-sex couples, or does it only work with opposite energy?" Does the same dynamics absolutely apply in, same-sex relationships because all sexual attraction is generated by polarity. So, almost always one partner is a little more yin, the other partner is a little more yang. There's always these varying degrees of yin and yang. So, this can absolutely be practiced in same-sex relationships. Jackson says, Damo Mitchell has stated in a podcast that most Qigong exercises and sets will not actually build or increase your life force chi. He says that static standing practices are better for this. Thoughts? I agree to a certain extent in that, yeah, I definitely feel that standing practices are the biggest chi generators, and that's why the foundation of my practice is standing practices. And that's why the first thing I teach in Qigong is how to stand to generate chi in your body. So I agree with this, but um, eventually you get to a point where it doesn't matter whether you're standing, sitting, lying down, you can generate tremendous chi. It took me a while. I'm not saying I'm generating tremendous chi, but I mean, it feels like it some days. It's like crazily, and I'm like, "Mm, it's intense." Um, but it took me a while to get to the point to where I could do it sitting, to where I could do it laying down. So in the beginning, yeah, the standing is it's very important. Alexander B says higher things don't work without energy body infrastructure is set because they build on one another. They only work when the previous parts have developed truly to fuel the next stages. Yeah, overall. I mean, it depends. Like for like the most mechanical aspects of chi cultivation, absolutely. Synaptic decor says the most important foundational step then to build the Dantian. I have had several long streaks of steam retention and transmutation, but I always feel unstable after a certain point of energy harvested. So yes, the first most important foundational step is Dantian building. That is the most foundational thing in energetic cultivation. Absolutely. And yeah, when it comes to seam retention, it's not necessarily of like you again, I'm not an extremist about this because I've experimented with many things. And in the beginning, I had the mindset that a lot of people have of like, okay, ejaculation is completely wrong. Under no circumstance should I do it. I'll never ejaculate again. And after a few years of this, inevitably having wet dreams after a certain time period, and also realizing that after a certain duration, I actually didn't feel it benefits. I realized that at a certain point, ejaculation could be bouncing, actually. Maybe, maybe 1 month, 2 months, it depends, and that's also based on, like, your practice involving sexual kung fu techniques. You're harvesting the energy, and during sex, you're drawing up that energy, drawing it, storing it in your body before ejaculating, so you're just, like you're shooting on an empty shell. You've harvested the spark of yang within that sperm. Nostalgia is asking, what qigong practice should we start with in your list? Start with Zhuang, the standing meditation qigong. I have a video of this on my YouTube channel. I need to make an updated one actually, and the Dantian breathing practice. Antoine says 20 days of semen retention, but I can't feel my microcosmic orbit during meditation. Any advice? Uh, yeah. So if you want the microcosmic orbit to be tangible, you must build the Dantian. And this doesn't mean you can't work with the microcosmic orbit before you have the Dantian in place. Definitely not, especially when you're doing semen retention. You want to be moving energy through the orbit because that's balancing, refining, circulating your energy. It's not tangible because your energy isn't at a higher level of pressure. It's just at a normal baseline rate. And that doesn't mean there's nothing flowing through orbit. It just means you don't have an extraordinary level of energy other than what you already had running available in your overall system running through your orbit. But the mind will move it, circulate it, balance the energy. So you're getting benefits by doing microcosmic orbit. However, if you want to have the electrical hydraulic fluid feeling of the orbit running tangibly, you must build a lot of chi in the dantian, and that can take years. Like it took me several years to consistently feel chi running through my microcosmic orbit when I sit and meditate on it. And that just took the time of building chi within the lower dantian. Because what happens is that you build chi in the lower dantian, doing all this work, it starts to pressurize, starts to compress. So now your chi is at a higher level of pressure. It's a higher level of concentration. And now when you run through your microcosmic orbit, it's like, holy shit, there's all of a sudden a 200-volt current running through there, and you feel it because your body and your system's not used to that. It's a brand new experience, and it's a heightened level of intensity. So that's the secret to feeling the orbit is build up the dantian. I do wanna mention my Immortal Energy Arts online school, which is an in-depth training in qigong, neigong, that this kind of work I'm talking about here, really pressurizing the dantian channels. It's kind of a low-key thing I don't talk about a lot because I know most people are interested in the sexual kung fu stuff, which is fantastic, but if you wanna go, like, all in of just pure energetic cultivation, go to immortalenergyarts.com, check that out. Alex Katsanos, what's up? Says, "How much are you taking?" I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure who that question's for. Alice Katsanos, yes, Immortal Energy Arts is still active. I am adding stuff on there. Randall Frank is asking, "What are the main energetic blocks that hinder sexual energy flow?" Well, physical tension's the number one. We can narrow most of it down to say tension. Tension is the biggest block, but tension often has an emotional component to it. It's like, why are you tense in the first place? Yeah, maybe too much weightlifting or something without stretching out, but for the most part, it's usually emotional self-defense mechanisms, that often come from our childhood or from other, difficult experiences in our life. Some common things I think are like guilt and shame. Shame around sexuality, that's very common. Self-doubt, lack of self-love, just not feeling safe with sexuality, not feeling safe in your body. A lot of very, very deep stuff around that, I would say, are some of the blocks. But specifically, um, I also feel that a lack of openness in the spine, a lack of awareness of the body, to, like, move and cycle that energy through. A lot of constriction in the diaphragm and the belly as well, because when your belly's constricted, you just have, like, this wall of concrete here that your sexual energy can't move through, and, of course, a extension of this, or maybe a root of this, we could say, is the pelvic floor tension as well in men, so that's why I'm a huge proponent of releasing the hypertension patterns for men, because that's going to make it difficult to sustain high levels of arousal, make it difficult to control ejaculation, and make it difficult to have non-ejaculatory orgasms. Martin is asking why I don't recommend Delay Cream. Says he uses Stud 100 spray. Well, overall, my philosophy is like I don't wanna use crutches. I don't wanna use Band-Aids and things. Like, I'm about getting to the root of the issue using very, like, natural, holistic methods of doing that. And it's not to say, like, I think that you should never, ever use these, like, delay creams, whatever, but one of the things that was, like, I wouldn't wanna numb myself because I wanna feel what's happening during sex, and for some people, it can prevent like having proper erections and pleasure because they're numbing sensitive areas of the penis. But on the other hand, obviously, gives you the benefit of you're able to have sex without ejaculating. So it's not that I'm against them. I'm not gonna use them personally, but I also don't really recommend them because if you practice the sexual kung fu, you really, like, practice it, really implement it, really do the work, um, eventually you're gonna get to the root of the issue that's causing premature ejaculation, overcome it. Synaptic Decor is asking, "Does it matter which direction you use for the microcosmic orbit? Some days I feel my back can move energy upwards, and other days it's the front that does. Is there a right direction?" Well, my opinion and experience, it's either direction. What's most commonly taught is the fire path, up the back of the spine, down the front of the body. Some teachers I've had teachers tell me, like, "Under no circumstances should the orbit run the other way." I've had some teachers that say, like, "It can't run in the other way," or that it only runs the other way sometimes for women. I've heard different things. I've heard one teacher say that when we ejaculate, the orbit naturally runs the other way and drains out our vitality. So it's like, that's all just words. It's all information. It's like, what do you do with it? And I'm an experimenter. I experiment, I see what happens, I see what I experience from it. And what I find is that, you can run the orbit in either direction, and I find the back to front, up the back, down the front to be is definitely the more fire path. It's more yang, more stimulating, more kinda brain charging, whereas the front channel, when I run the front channel up the front, down the back, to me, that feels more calming, more sedating, more yin, water pathway driving the channel. And it will also connect you more to your emotional body. And so you can use this to your advantage depending on what you need. For example, oftentimes at night, laying in bed, I'll run the orbit in the reverse direction, and I will find that calming. Or during sexual cultivation, if I feel like I'm a little too, like, aggressive, too, like, just unemotional, logical, I find that circulating my sexual energy up the front channel helps me to really, like, open up my heart and have a more kinda, emotional connection with my partner, if that feels appropriate at the time. Get Right says, "What if I retain for 5 plus years and start having non-ejaculatory sex? Will the pleasure be insane, like times 1,000?" I don't think it will be any more different than going 30 days, because the thing with retention is often there's this, like, the longer you go, the more and more and more it builds, but, like, it's not true. Definitely not true in my experience. It's like you plateau around 30 days or so, and then, it's not to say like, yeah, your pleasure is intensified, but it's not gonna be like steady, steady, steady thing, and if you go 5 years without ejaculating and you're not doing, like, the internal practices stimulating your sexual organs, the most likely thing to happen is when you have sex, you'll just ejaculate, like, at the slightest touch because you build up a lot of pressure and it can, like it tends to overcharge the the sympathetic nervous system when you are kinda doing this sort of retention without balancing the energy, and, like, when there's a lot of pressure in the seminal vesicles, that also stimulates the sympathetic nerves. So, like, overall, no. Yes, there'll be more pleasure when you're not ejaculate when you haven't ejaculated in a while, but it's not just like a continuous slope of the longer the better necessarily. Ah. Thrive like a Viking. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Glad that you've found something beneficial from this work and are walking the path. Klaus Gonzalez says, "Do you have any audiobook recommendations on these topics that would be worth listening to?" Uh, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Most of the books that I've read on the sexual practices are not audiobooks. You can see what's out there, but, um, no, I don't know of any audiobooks, unfortunately. I'm sure there's some. I just haven't found, usually with this stuff, I'm like, I want, like, a physical book to, like, really have the thing, tangible. Rendell Frank says, "If we maintained the pure state we were in when we were born, would we just naturally have powerful full body orgasms?" I definitely I believe yes. I believe so. When I was This is gonna sound weird maybe, but when I was, like, 6 or 7 years old, I actually had my first full body orgasm. It may be strange. I think I've told the story before, but, um, I was sick. I had a fever. I was sleeping on the couch, and I went into this dream, and I'm not sure if it was still a dream or, like, I was waking up from a dream, but I just remember there was this intense pleasure down there. I didn't really know what was happening at that time. I was too young for really a context, but I was having an orgasm. It was, like, up in my belly, and it was, like, very, very intense, very full body, 6 or 7 years old. And the first time I had a non-ejaculatory orgasm, when I started getting into these practices, I remembered that experience. I had completely forgotten about it, and then I had my first non-ejaculatory orgasm, and I suddenly just had a flashback to that experience. I was like, "Holy shit, I forgot about that." So, it was interesting. But yeah, I think that it's a combination of many things. I think porn is one of the number one things because we're watching what's happening on porn, and it's just, like, frantic, intense, thrusting, close-ups, ejaculation, that's what it's all about, and, like, that's what we view as sex, and that programs us to, like, "This is what I need to experience, this is what should arouse me," and we get locked into that. And also the inherent, I would say, constriction of our sexuality, all the shaming around it, we don't really, like, have time and space to explore it. It's always very rushed and, like, "Okay, gotta do this quick before mom walks in," so we develop a stress response to sex and orgasm, where if, you know, we if it hadn't been so shamed, we'll say, if we hadn't had so many constrictions about it, I think naturally men would be multi-orgasmic. White Corp Design says, "How does a vasectomy affect the energy, movement, and the spiritual side of a man?" I'm not completely sure, having never had a vasectomy, but what I've heard from some men is that, like, some men lose their sex drive after having a vasectomy. I think it may be more rare, but it does happen, and I've heard from some men that they, like, completely regret it. They're like, they feel like they don't have that something's been lost, basically. So, I don't know. Personally, I would never do a surgery like this, an unnatural alteration of my sexual I would never cut anything in my genitals personally. William Cranston says, "Do you teach the Dantian meditation in the male sexual mastery course?" Uh, that one is not in the course. That course is just like bare essentials for, well, not bare essentials, but like the essentials for the sexual practice. The Dantian work, I teach that in Multigasmic Man, and there's Dantian work in, Sex God course as well. But I do have my free Dantian breathing practice on YouTube, which is just add that in, you'll be solid. And Antone asks, "So it takes years for non-ejaculatory orgasm mastering?" Yeah, it can, certainly can. It'll be different for everyone. Some men get it right away, some men it takes years. The Animal Act Alchemist says, "To not ejaculate, I have to have a sattvic diet because my libido is way too high. Have you come across this before?" Well, your diet does your diet definitely does affect your libido, but, me personally, I want to have a high libido, and, yeah, I eat a lot of animal products, a lot of pasture-raised meats and saturated fats. It's a big staple of my diet now, lots of meat. Since I started eating a lot more meat about a year ago, I was just how my body composition changed, how my libido changed. I was like, "Holy shit," because I actually didn't eat that much meat before, realized. So, anyways, but yeah, it's just like, sure, it will be balanced. If you don't wanna have a high libido, then eating certain foods that don't build your sex drive, yeah, sure, if that's balancing for you, but for me personally, like, I want that high testosterone, baby. Kairos with that. Have you tried Shilajit, the resin from Himalayas? I have, and I that's one of my supplements I often take. It's, really, really great. It's the conqueror of weakness, destroyer of weakness, something like that. Shilajit's great, loaded with trace minerals. also humic fulvic acid, which every man should be taking. Really great detoxification from, everything in the world around us. Ray says, "But isn't the plateau you're talking about basically just a flat line? Most people, after a while, the flat line goes away and libido comes back even harder. Isn't that the flat line?" So maybe explain this a bit more. The first years I did semen retention, it was a case of, like, the longer I went, the better I felt. Because my philosophy on this, my experience with this is, like, your vitality is your sexual vitality is like a bucket of water, and you're born with it full. With every ejaculation, you're releasing some drops. You're releasing some drops. And it's not a big deal, but if, you do that every single day, multiple times a day, it starts to catch up. And what's happening is men now in their 20s, what's happening for me is like, "Oh shit, my bucket's almost empty. I fucked that up." And so by practicing retention, every day you're adding a drop back in the bucket. You're adding a drop back in the bucket overall with your vitality. And when you ejaculate, you take a few drops out of the bucket. And it's not a big deal as long as you're putting drops back in the bucket more than you're taking away. So what I found was after about how long was it? I think 4 years or so, maybe 5 years of steam retention, that's when, um, basically, it wasn't a case like the longer I go, the better I feel. It was actually a point where when I started ejaculating about every 4 to 6 weeks, I had the highest libido, I had the highest sex drive, I had the highest testosterone, because after that, it just and another thing I would experience is my erections would be less hard, um, certain changes, and again, I've experienced too many different things, but this is what currently working the best for me, and it is often the most reasonable aspect for most men. And I should also put on top of this that I'm in a relationship, I'm having sex frequently, non-ejaculatory sex, which is, again, feeling tremendous amounts of energy, and if I was single, if I was not having sex, if I was celibate, then I probably would be retaining my semen for as long as I could, but it's a whole different ballgame. When you're doing the partner practices, you build up ridiculous amounts of energy, and again, when I'm doing my sexual kung fu practice, and then I have an hour of sex, draw the energy up, draw the energy up, draw the energy up, and then ejaculate, like, freely giving energy to my partner, there's an exchange there, and I'm just, like, ejaculating into a tissue or something. Um, I don't feel any energy loss. Like, 10 minutes later, I don't feel like I've ejaculated, I feel like a teenager again. So that's kinda the context of what I'm talking about here. And the other factor was, like, there I would always have a wet dream at about somewhere between 60 and 90 days, nothing I could do. No mat all I did all the practices, everything, and then, like and I just took that and this happens to most guys. A lot of guys like, "Well, wet dreams don't count." I'm still on my streak. It's like, I don't know. I don't have that, like, sort of mindset. I'm a very practical person. Alright, guys, just a few more questions here. I'm just gonna pick some relevant questions. B. Harvey's asking, "What's your evening routine?" Depends on the day. Sometimes I'm going to taekwondo class and to come home and eat dinner and, you know, go for a little walk outside and go to sleep. Usually I do my qigong I do a hour qigong practice, qigong meditation. I'll do from, like, 6 to 7 PM, maybe 5:30 to 7, and then I'll eat dinner, spend some time with my partner. I do recently I've been walking outside for a little bit, then I do about a 20, 30-minute kinda evening practice of kinda stretching, winding down, do some, like, shui gong practices that prepare the body for sleep, do some healing sounds, whatever. Sometimes there's some evening sexual cultivation too, you know what I'm saying? So, it varies, but basically that's I one thing that's very specific though is I turn off my phone usually no later than 8 PM. I go to bed around 10:30 PM, so I turn off my phone, unplug the Wi-Fi, transition out of electronic stimulation. Okay, there's a couple different questions about, um, the Christ oil. So, for me, this is a very vague thing. I know people like to talk about this, like, "Yes, the Christ oil is," it's like and I'm like, "How do you measure this? Like, how do you know?" because people love these kinda, like, mystical concepts, and then, I understand, but it's like I'm like, how do you actually measure this? I know it's, like, talked about a lot in text and things like that, and so theoretically, what's happening is that this secretion is released from the brain. Maybe it's released to practicing retention, building up sexual energy, moving the energy through the microcosmic orbit, whatever, and the Taoists talk about this too, though they have a different, terminology for it. They actually have a very kinda systemic approach of, like, this is how you know if you're doing it or not, because you taste this a certain taste, and the saliva is secreted, and it tastes like nectar because the saliva, comes from these secretions of the brain and the glands, so, basically, this, like, substance is secreted because you've releasing certain hormones and things in your brain. Uh, Energy's been transformed in a certain way, and now it's concentrated back to Jing. Yeah, it's theoretical. I don't know. I have had, like, interesting taste in my mouth when meditating, but, like, I don't try to get too much into the story of, like, "Yes, it's Christ oil, now enlightened," or whatever. It's just like, I don't know. I don't really know what's happening. I just know, like, what I feel like, and I feel good. I feel balanced. I'm having a fucking LSD type trip from this meditation I just did. That's cool. So that's more of, like, my indicators rather than, like, these, you know, things. Synaptic decor. Glad to hear it. Chris Taylor says he had a vasectomy 13 years ago, still going strong. Don't have to worry about, impregnating anyone. Can go for hours, still feel testosterone in the body. Okay, so yeah, like, yeah, great. Like, I've heard this a lot from men too, where they have a vasectomy and it's like nothing really changed. That's great. And then I've heard from some men where it's like it was a disaster. So it's like, you know, for some it's good, for some, I don't know. Yeah, it's whatever. Again, I don't know, I have no opinion on it. Well, I have the opinion that I wouldn't do it because I don't like to do these things to my body, but, like, I don't know, I'm not saying, like, no one should ever do this. I'm very curious about it, to be honest, because I don't know many, like, practitioners of sexual kung fu who have had vasectomies. Alfonso's asking, "Do you have a self-cultivation practice?" Yes. So I still do. Not as it varies, like, sometimes I'll go weeks without, well, not weeks, often first thing in the morning, working my morning erections, like, alright. I will say that for me, self-stimulation, self-cultivation is one of the best way that I've, like, developed a lot of the techniques that I teach is because I have this, it's like, whatever, I'm by myself, I can experiment with all kinds of weird shit, like, who cares? And that's where I've developed actually a lot of practices from that. So it's an experimentation for me. B. Harvey's asking how long I sleep with all of my energy. I try to get my 8 hours of sleep. Like, I know it's common, people doing this stuff, like, "I only need to sleep 3 or 4 hours a day," and, one of my teachers is like that. He says he only sleeps 3 or 4 hours a day, but I'm like, I've done that, and what's mostly happening in this case, I'm not saying, like, for him specifically, like, sure, a master like him, it's certainly possible. I've heard of a lot of people who are, like, just hardcore meditators where they only need a few hours of sleep, which makes sense if you're in theta state for hours a day. But for me personally, like, I just get fucking burned out because the most common thing that's happening, especially guys who are on steam retention and they're saying, "Oh, I only need a few hours of sleep." Usually this just means that the sympathetic nervous system is overcharged, and I've had this experience at various times in my life where I was only sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night because I had cortisol pumping, and I felt energized. I felt like I was on coffee 24/7. And you translate that as being like, "Oh, yeah, I have so much energy that I need less sleep." But really what's happening is your sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive. You're pumping cortisol through your body, and, you can ride that for a few weeks or months, but eventually you're gonna crash hard, and that's what happened to me. I was crashing fucking hard from that kinda lifestyle, and I realized, "Oh, I've just been in a delusion. I need to I need to prioritize sleep. I need to prioritize parasympathetic nervous system balance." You know what I mean? So, yeah. Okay, Ray's ASMR is asking how to control the erection. Because after a period of retention, hard time keeping wood down in public. Yeah, that happened to me as well. When I was first getting into retention, I started having spontaneous erections again like I was a teenager. But if you master the power lock, just drawing the energy up into the belly or wherever you wanna bring the energy to, like, instantly you can get your erection down. So, that's what I would do. My first year doing sexual kung fu, I was waking up at 3 in the morning with these just raging hard erections that would not go away. So, I would get out of bed, I would do at the time, I was doing, like, the big draw, the Montauk Chia book, flex everything, and I would do that until the erection went away. But check out my power lock video. Do that. Get good at that, and you'll be able to pull your erection down in a few breaths. Okay, Cody's asking, have you come across information regarding the sex transmutation process in homosexual relationships with masculine and feminine energetic counterparts? It's not something I understand like the process is basically the same overall. It's like, you're holding masculine and feminine dynamics. But nothing in super detail, I would say. But I do know some people who teach this stuff more specific for, homosexual men, things like that. So they're probably better to learn this stuff from. As far as, like, how it directly looks like in that type of relationship. It's like my understanding is these are all just principles and it's equally applicable because it's all just yin and yang. One person holds yeah, and a lot the partner practice that my partner and I do, and what I'm teaching in sex god is one partner is holding the masculine polarity, the other partner is holding the feminine polarity, yin and yang, and you can alternate between them. But it's like just having the awareness that if one partner is yang, the other partner must be yin to have attraction, being able to really skillfully move with that, but even transition between the two states. So that's regardless of gender or sexual orientation, that's applicable. John Mao, yeah, I'll get Mariah on here to do another live with me. We've been wanting to do a live together. We are. I'm gonna kind of tease this right now. We're teaching a course together on sex and money. It's gonna be I'll be talking more about that, but it'll be coming out soon. Basically, like opening up to receive more sexual pleasure and how that correlates to being able to receive money, more financial abundance, and like the constrictions that we have, the shame around sexuality, how that relates to the shame we have around money and feeling worthiness and things like that. So we're putting a course together on this. It's gonna be really awesome. So just kinda a little teaser there. Ego Killer says, "Is it possible to learn all these practices if I have ADHD?" I would say absolutely. And the thing is, hope I don't offend anyone, but I think that ADHD is a made up condition because here's the thing, the pharmaceutical industry creates diseases, conditions, because now they can sell drugs for them. And so now, like, and then you identify it, so you're like, "Oh, I have this thing, I have to take this pill for life, whatever." But it's like, really what this is just you have a hard time paying attention. Probably if you spend a lot of time on a screen watching videos, if you can only watch like a 15 if you're watching TikTok videos, 10 seconds, something new, 10 seconds, you're training your brain to not be able to focus. And on top of that, if your diet is poor, if you're eating a lot of, processed food, seed oils, if you have heavy metal toxicity in your body, it's going to affect your ability to concentrate. So most likely these are the things that are causing an inability to focus. It's not that you have some disease. It's that factors are in place creating this. And I used to be the same way when I'm trying to think really right before I got into sexual kung fu practice. I thought I had ADHD because I couldn't focus very well. And then I cleaned up my diet. I, you know, got into energetic practices and learned. I trained my focus. I trained myself to sit and do one thing. And it was really hard at first, but with practice, I got better at it. And now I would say I have pretty good focus to where I can do one thing for a long time. I can sit here and like stare at a tree in a qigong posture for an hour. You know what I mean? And yeah, my mind wanders a little bit, but overall, it changes every day, but my focus has gotten pretty solid. All right, guys. Alex is asking me, ever notice how easy it is to look at your third eye during sex if you struggle with looking at the third eye in meditation? Happens to me. I have actually noticed that because what I feel like I don't do this as much now, but I used to very often when I was like pulling up the energy or going into this orgasmic state, I would roll my eyes back and I would see the light up above, kind of pointing the eyes up. So yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I have. Okay, guys, thanks for joining me. Good to be back, you guys. What can I say? Take care, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks for joining me.